Meditation has a lot of benefits. We know that, otherwise we probably wouldn't be here. And the idea about meditation is that we practice it in such a way that it benefits our everyday life. If it was only beneficial and felt good while we're doing actual practice, I know I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't. I don't know why people would. I mean, there's some pleasure in the moment, some relaxation in the moment, but we should. We're actually meditating to cultivate something that it will carry through our everyday life. Our everyday living. Throughout the rest of our life. And the Buddha said that we suffer, and that there can be an end to this suffering. And one of the suggestions he talked about was meditation, and among other things, to follow, to be moral and to train the mind in certain aspects of life, through different teachings and things like that. And so that's what drove me to Buddhism, is through meditation, actually. And so the practice, from my own experience, has really benefited me, and I've seen it benefit a lot of people. And it works, it's very subtle, and it's sometimes so subtle that we don't even notice the changes that it makes for us. But it does work. And if it didn't, we might not be, probably wouldn't be here, And the thing, if we want it to work in our everyday life, we have to understand some aspects of it, primarily the intention that we put behind it, and how we can use meditation to help us in the everyday life, everyday experience, is to understand that meditation is designed to bring us into this presence and this stillness where we can get to know ourselves, through the body and the mind a little bit more intimately, to be able to see what's rising and falling and coming into our awareness, to be able to see these experiences. So we bring ourselves to a comfortable posture, and we make ourselves, bring ourselves into a room where there's not too much noise, and hopefully the temperature is nice for us, and kind of make the body comfortable, and we close our eyes, and we come to this this place where we can notice that this stillness and this presence is something that we can come close to and actually fit into in a way. And the way we do that is to focus on a meditation object. That really light concentration is really all we need. It doesn't have to be the teeth gritting kind of determination that can actually cause suffering for us. But light concentration. And so we focus on our meditation object, and we notice that there's still thoughts, happening. And the mind wanders off, but we learn to catch that and bring our attention back, to the meditation object. And after a while, the thoughts don't bother us as much as they did. In other words, they don't pull us away from that meditation object so much. And when that happens, when these things do pull us away from the meditation object, and I'm talking about the breath in most cases. We use the breath as our meditation object. And when that happens, we can notice what it is, because it's seemingly everything's slowed down a little bit. We're focusing on the breath, and something grabs our attention. Something besides the sound or besides the sensation in the body, but something mental, grabs our attention. And it is generally is something that is, if our intention is to focus, this thing grabs our attention away from that focus. And the consequence is that we should be looking at that very briefly to see what it is. And it's probably one of three things. It's probably, if it's something habitual, we want to notice that it is reoccurring a lot, that it is something that has happened maybe throughout the day, or that's something happening in this meditation again and again. This habitual memory, or this habitual thought patterns, something like that. And also, if it is related to, we should notice it if it's related to being anger or fear, something that we're angry about, something that happened in the past, or fear-based, something that we're afraid might happen in the future. And also another area, primarily speaking of three different areas here. The habitual patterns of the mind, the anger and the fear, future and or past and future. And another area is the attachment and stickiness of these things that come up for us. And these usually, we can see them as things that we feel will bring us pleasure. And the mind will kind of get drawn into that, and it just like a candy or something. Our mind will want to have a tendency to go through this pleasurable thing. Might be a memory of somebody, or a memory of something, or it might be the idea of getting a new sports car, something like that, or some object, that object of desire. But it could be a circumstance as well. Anything sticky, that we feel drawn to. And in Buddhism, when you read the sutras, that they sum these things up as being greed, hatred, and delusion. And greed is that stickiness, that things that we grasp onto, or the attachments that we have. And anytime that we have an attachment to something, we will suffer to some degree, because it's constantly changing. Especially if we think it's going to bring us pleasure. If we base our lives on pleasure, and that's what we're going after constantly, we should be very experienced with stress and suffering, because that's what it brings. This is the desire, the greed that's often spoke of. And the hatred, or the anger that's based on the past. This is a type of aversion. It could be ill will, so it could be anger towards ourselves, or something that we did, or anger that we feel something that somebody did to us. And these are things to look out for, in our meditation. And then the fear of the future is mixed in with this restlessness and worry, one of the hindrances of our meditation practice. As well as these, there are other thing that's mixed in with this restlessness and worry is the habitual patterns of the mind, the habitual thoughts, or the habitual wanting to fix this, or the habitual going back into some scenario that happened, or some pain that we caused somebody, or some pain that somebody caused us. And so to sum these things up, greed, hatred, and delusion. Delusion is the mind that's just spinning around. That's the habitual patterns. And doesn't really know where to settle. It's the restlessness of the mind. And it can show up in the mind and it can show up in the body. We've all seen people that are confused, and we get like that. We forget what we're doing and we head in one direction. We go, what was I doing? And we turn around and come back, and all these different things. So if there's restlessness in the mind, there's often restlessness in the body as well. And in meditation, we get a chance to see all of this, because these are the things that will pull us away from our meditation object. So meditation is not a time to be thinking or fixing or creating or journaling in the mind or doing a checklist or anything like that. If we allow that to happen, that'll be habitual too. Every time we sit in meditation, the mind will want to do these things. But meditation is a time for basically two things. I should say three things. To find this stillness and this presence, which is done by focusing on an object. And then when that happens, and then that object and us really become one, and we don't have to really rely on the focus. We just sit in that presence. And in that presence, there's two things that are quite critical, and that's acceptance of what is happening in the moment, in the stillness. If we're worried about wanting things to be better, or worried about something that's happening in the room, without acceptance, it won't work. We have to have an acceptance of the situation in the moment. And then also the letting go is very crucial, and that's letting go of any of the attachments or any of the stickiness that comes up in our meditation. That's really the basis behind the practice. And now we can all go home, I guess, right? Maybe we'll do a meditation practice first, and we'll see how things come up for us. So these concepts are, really quite basic. We're sitting, and we're bringing ourselves into this presence, and then in this presence, we look and see what tries to pull us out of it. And in that pulling out of it are these things that I just mentioned. I don't want to go through them again, but maybe we can talk about it afterwards. And are there any questions before we start the meditation? Pardon me? You want to close it? Sure. Oh, it's coming up on my computer. People should not be messaging me when I'm...
True.
With the eyes closed, bring your attention to the body. Allow yourself to feel comfortable with the environment. Try to make the body comfortable in its posture, whether you're on a cushion or a chair. One of the beneficial things about posture is trying to keep the back straight. It seems to help us in several ways. It helps us stay alert so that we don't get drowsy. or fall asleep. Sometimes when we sit in a chair for drowsy, we can move up to the front of the chair and not allow ourselves to lean against the back. But that's all a personal choice. If we're in a chair, usually it's a good idea to have both feet on the floor. Or if you're in a taller chair, to have a couple of cushions underneath your feet is fine. Some people like to remind themselves to lift the chin a little bit. We can bring the chin up, then kind of bring it back, tick it back, in other words, to the back a little, just a notch. And if we like, we can bring the shoulders back a little bit and then allow them to fall down a little. If we want an example of a perfect posture for a meditation, we can just think of the statue of a Buddha. Whether we're sitting in a chair or sitting in the cushion, doesn't matter about our level of concentration or our level of where we're at with our meditation practice. As long as we have the alertness and the energy, so that we can rest in this presence without drifting off. So with the eyes closed and the posture we have, we can bring our attention to the body, and for many of us, we might want to bring our attention immediately to the breath. When we bring our attention to the breath, this can mean different things to each person. It can mean noticing the caressing of the breath against the body, maybe at the nostrils or the tip of the nose. You might notice the breath in the sinuses or the windpipe, or we might be paying attention to the movement of the abdomen. We might be counting the breaths, counting up to 10 and back down to 1, or up to 21. Some people will count up to 100 and back down to 1. We might visualize the breath, visualize the top of the breath, or the inhalation, and the bottom of the exhalation. We might visually try to find the middle of the breath as we breathe in, and the middle of the breath as we breathe out. When we're picking up on the sensation of the breathing, we might notice the coolness or the warmth, the moisture, or just the slight movement of the breeze that it causes. So the breath can mean different things to different people. That's just one meditation object. If we have a different meditation object, that's fine too. No matter what it is, doesn't matter as much as the intention to find that object, be very familiar with it, and stay with it. Although the breath is the number one meditation object, most popular meditation object in the world, there are other things, such as other visualizations and other sounds, things like this. So these are all tools that we use to bring ourselves into this presence. And when we're in this presence, we we usually feel like it's a communion with ourself, with our true nature. And for many people, when they dwell in this for long lengths of time, they start to realize that the nature of the self is not as what they thought it was. And that the nature of the self is not so burdened down by activities, of the day, and the sometimes crazy world that we live in. Because in this presence, we have a tendency to linger there if we are not dwelling on the past or the future, if we're not thinking usually the everyday thoughts that we've been having. We're not planning for things to be different or better. There's a great deal of acceptance, and we're accepting everything that happened in the past, everything up to this point. We're not making an agreement that everything is perfect in the world or anything like that necessarily, but for the time being, we're accepting everything as it is for our own benefit. And the benefit is that we're here to meditate. Our intention is to meditate and find this present moment. So we pick up the breath as a tool, or whatever our meditation object is. We focus on it very lightly. When something pulls our attention away, it could be a sound, it could be a sensation in the body. But for most parts, it's a memory, a thought, some kind of cognitive experience of some type. And there's nothing wrong with any of this, but that's not the intention of the meditation practice. And so we catch the wandering mind, the thought, whether it's something in the past or something in the future. Could be a habitual pattern of thinking. Something might come up that's extremely sticky, that really causes a noticing of an attachment for us. We just notice these things and then come back to the breath. And oftentimes this noticing or this awareness is enough, that we are aware of where the attention is going. And this might happen a few times, and then it dissipates, and we can settle with the breath a little bit easier. Sometimes it takes a little bit more edginess on our part. We want to be careful of too much mental activity, though. And if it's a habitual pattern, something that comes up again and again, we have to give ourselves permission to set that aside, and that we'll take a look at it at a later time. And then we come back to the breath. Come back to our intention of sitting in this stillness and this presence and communing with our true nature. we are beyond the thinking mind, the aversions, the fear and the anger, the dissatisfaction. So every time we come back to the breath, we can see that as a clean slate. We're starting fresh all over again. Experiencing our true nature in this presence. The mind wanders off. We can bring it back, just like starting all over again each time. And that's the practice of meditation. dark back there still. We'll recite this together. Everybody has a copy. To attain the state of peace, one skilled in goodness should be able, upright, perfectly upright, gentle in speech, kind, and free from pride, contented, easily satisfied, with limited duties and unburdened livelihood, controlled in senses, discreet, reserved, and not blindly attached to groups. One should not commit the slightest wrong, that the wise might censor, wishing, may there be happiness and security, may all beings be happy. Whatever beings there are, whether feeble or strong, tall or short, large, medium, or small, microscopic or mammoth, leaving none, seen or unseen, living near or far away, born or to be born, may all beings be happy. Let one not deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere, neither in anger nor in ill will should one wish another harm. Just as a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so, one should cultivate a limitless concern for all living beings. Extend loving kindness throughout the world without limitation, above, below, and across, free of obstruction, enmity, or hostility. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, one should diligently sustain this mindfulness. This is called sublime living. Without holding narrow views, but being endowed with broad vision and avoiding attachment to sense desires, the virtuous are not born again into this world. May each one of us and all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to us. May no difficulties come to us. May we all meet with spiritual and worldly success. And may we have the patience, the courage, and the understanding to meet and overcome any problems or any difficulties that we might face in life. Thank you. Very quiet tonight. Very nice and quiet. No dogs barking, no hot rod engines out there or anything. It occurred to me that some of the people that wanted to be here, and I got an email on this before we left, but the Democratic debate is going on right now. And so we're missing some stuff. I don't know what we're missing, but it could be interesting. But
lots of truth.
Yeah. But it's interesting. So I'm sure they all, all the politicians have their stories, and they're doing whatever they can to, win the hearts of the people, which they should do, I guess. They're just doing what they should do. And they're searching. I guess there's, part of the politician, they're not any different than anybody else. They feel that they're, gaining that position, of possibly becoming president would maybe provide happiness for them, or maybe they're hoping to provide more happiness and more stability for for the people. I guess that's probably what drives them to want to be president, one of the two, right? Maybe they're doing it for their mommy and daddy. I don't know. Maybe their parents thought they should someday be president of the United States, so they're doing it for them. I don't know, but I would think it's to provide happiness, and either for themselves or for others. And if they're thinking that would provide permanent happiness, of course they're mistaken. And there's a story, I'm leading up to a story here, of this king in this country that was, this country was nice. It had everything that every country needed, to be a nice country. And he had his subjects were, for the most part, they were very happy. But he wanted to find some permanent happiness for the people and primarily for himself. And he thought, there's so many people here that if I put out a reward, because this king had a lot of money, and he said, if I put out a reward for somebody to look and find permanent happiness, that somebody should come up with it. Somebody should be able to find it. And so he told all the subjects, of all the people in his land, that he will give them a large sum of money. I'll make them the second richest person in the land. He's the richest, And that person that finds this happiness, this pleasantness, will be I'll give them all these riches. So the subjects, some of them, so he suggested they go off and find this happiness. And some of them stayed in the area. Some of them thought, well, I can find happiness here. Some of them have jobs where they're almost happy and they think they can tweak their job and make it a little bit nicer, and they could find that person, that happiness, and report back to the king and tell him that they found this happiness. And some other people thought, well, I'll stay in the pub here. I'm almost finding my happiness here in this bottle, or maybe in that bottle or that bottle. I'll stay here and try to find my happiness here. And then some of them, they thought, well, we have to go out and find happiness. We're not going to find it here. Otherwise, somebody would have found it by now. We'll go out and find it. So they said goodbye to their wives and their children and their loved ones, and these individuals went off. These mostly men and women, but mostly men. And then some of the men had the idea, well, I'm not going to go out there. I'm going to stay here. Maybe I can find my happiness with all these women that these people are leaving behind. And so these people are in far away lands, looking and looking and looking for this happiness, so that they can report back to the king and tell the king how this happiness works, and then so that he can be permanently happy for the rest of his life. And they're looking and looking, and this is quite quite time consuming. So it's like years have passed, a couple of years have passed, and one guy's looking, and he runs into another guy that's looking, and he recognizes him from the village and the meeting that the king had. And he said, how's your search for happiness going? And he said, well, I'm a little busy right now, but I can tell you that I'm still looking. I think I'm getting closer, and things are going pretty well. I think that's about all I have time to tell you right now, because I'm busy looking. So he's looking, and he saw another guy that was looking, and he recognized him, and he said, how's your search going? And he said, it's going pretty good, but can you tell me what we're looking for? And the fella that we're speaking of, that found all these other people that were searching, he said, I'm not sure what we're looking for. I guess he said that's the thing, that we have to find what we're looking for in order to find this happiness. And so he left the man kind of bewildered. He was searching for something. He wasn't sure what he was searching for, and the man in the story began to think about this this looking and all this trouble that he's putting forth and all this searching and seeking to look for this happiness out there, and whether it can be found or not, this permanent happiness. And so he decided to give up the search. He headed back, to the country, and he decided to give it up. And he found that search in itself was causing stress and troubles for him. That the wanting more and looking for more and trying to get more was causing suffering in itself. And so he realized that when he stopped the search and stopped looking, that he was becoming more happy. And somebody realized that he was happy, and they told the king about this. So the king asked the man to come and sit before him and tell him what the situation was. And the man told him, he said, I know that I look happier. The king agreed. He said, you look like you're very happy. And he said, well, I've set down all my burdens, all my problems, and one of them is trying to find that happiness that you asked me to look for. And he said, when I stopped seeking, I became more happy. And so the king thought about this, and he thought, well, that's seems to be the answer, and he gave him the riches for finding this permanent happiness in letting go of the search and letting go of the seeking to try to find it, which was just the last thing to let go, for this man and for the king, was the desire, to have this happiness, this constant, permanent happiness in his life is enough to cause it to happen. So, in other words, we think and we feel that happiness can be found out there in things. The king told them to go out and find it, and only to realize that the happiness that they're looking for was the peace and the quiet was already within them by just resting in that. Like we were all doing in our meditation, resting in that still presence. And there's all sorts of stories like that in the not only in the Buddhist sutras, but in other spiritual books and readings of how people have gave up the search, and particularly in Buddhism. A lot of you have heard me mention this probably, but the Buddha himself was noted for giving up the search. I mean, that's really the story of the Buddha, that he left his family and left his father's kingdom and went out and got rid of his nice clothes and started wearing just a robe, basically rags, cut off his long hair, and so that he would look more like everybody else, so he wouldn't look like a prince looking for something, which he was. And so he spent 8 years looking for this happiness, this permanent happiness. And when he, and as the story unfolds, when he became enlightened, that was the end of the search. And the end of the search was also contributed to his enlightenment, to his liberation. No need to look any further. I had a teacher of mine say, he said, you can look and look and you'll never come to the point where you'll be absolutely free. He said, you'll never, ever get there. I can't get you there. You can't get there. Nobody can get to that point. He said, because you're already there. You're already free. It's like we don't see it. Interesting. Any questions from anybody? I don't want to do all the talking here. Mark, you must have something interesting to say.
I was just thinking that's kind of like what I've gone through, really.
Yeah.
When I first started meditating, I was searching for something to make me happy.
I remember when you first started, when
Yeah.
you first walked in, yeah.
Then it was like, I wasn't happy, and then I just kind of let go of looking for
Yeah.
stuff to make me happy.
Yeah.
And now I just don't really care. Just like,
But it's there. I mean, you're content.
yeah,
Yeah.
mostly. I mean, I don't let it bother me, like
Right.
like I used to.
Yeah. That's the story. That's it. Yeah. Anybody else feel that way? Maybe later. Even after this wonderful meditation.
There's an excellent book by this psychiatrist from Newport Beach, California, and I think there's a lot of Buddhism type stuff. He doesn't say that he's a Buddhist, but he does meditate, and he's a happiness psychiatrist, and he lives right at Newport Beach, and he said that all of his clientele are wealthy, virtually all are wealthy, successful millionaires and stuff like that. And he I'm listening to this audiobook for the third time. It's 9 hours, but it's really good stuff. And he talks about people, just the subject. He says he'll get. He said he had this one woman, and she was a billionaire. She got married, and she went on this big, expensive honeymoon and cruise, and spent millions on flowers and all this stuff and gas. And she ordered some beluga caviar. I've never tasted it. I've heard of it. I think I was like fishing. I've never had it.
Yeah.
But anyway, she ordered this beluga caviar, and when she got it, she said, this is not beluga. And it ruined her whole trip. This one imperfection. And he says that many of his clients will have a beautiful home on the beach, and then they might have another one, and then some guy who's equally well off will make it one that's just a little bigger, and they fall into this depression. It's like they're all like looking outside themselves.
Yeah.
What's the book called?
It's called Finding Your Happiness Flow. And the guy's name is Robert. This sounds kind of a strange name, Robert Puff.
Oh, I know that name, yeah.
And he has free blogs on YouTube.
Yeah. Robert Puff.
Yeah, he's really, and you can't listen to the guy without all of a sudden getting kind of peaceful.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got some things on YouTube. That's where I first ran into him. It's probably a blog of some sort.
It is.
A recorded blog, yeah.
Various aspects of happiness.
Yeah.
Will this make me happy?
Yeah.
Make me happy? And it's,
Yeah. It's true. I knew a guy that had a brand new Corvette, and that was his pride and joy, and he would drive it around, and then he pulled up behind a guy that had a Corvette, but he had 2 exhaust pipes coming out, and he only had one. And so it ruined him. It completely ruined him, because he thought, how did that guy get 2 exhaust pipes, and what should I do? And so this, so it's never enough, It's never enough. It's like taking, and I've seen this happen a couple of times where these people live in these wonderful mansions and stuff, and they're not happy, and then you take them camping, and they go, wow, it's such a different experience. They're just ecstatic. They just they've never been camping before. They think it's wonderful, to be in this rusticity, this rustic environment. Dangerous, wow, this is something, and they just light up, well, this is great, and there's so many, you know, the more you have, the more problems you have. The more money you have, you gotta do something with it, you know, and I was talking to, we have direct pointing here on last night, on Wednesday night, or Tuesday nights. And one of the gentlemen, he said that he works for one of the colleges here. He's been working there for quite a while, and he had this idea of homeless people and how homeless people live, and you know, that there's something wrong with them and all of this. And there was a homeless person that he would see on a bench outside of his office at the university. And so finally he got up enough gumption to go out there and ask the guy what he's doing. And he got in a conversation with him. And this guy, he said it was the most interesting person he's ever met, you know, this homeless guy, that he was homeless by choice. And he decided back in the 70s to be homeless. And he's basically a snowbird homeless person that comes here, you know, in the wintertime, and then he goes, in the summer times, he homelessly heads north, you know. Is that north? No, this is north. This is north. And he said that's by choice, all by choice. I don't know. He said it was the most, you know, interesting conversation he's ever had with anybody. He didn't go into details about it. Maybe we were talking about some other things, other subjects, but he said the man was not any unhappier than anybody with a mansion or anything like that. It's just, it is what it is. So material things can't do it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with material things and having nice things. Nothing wrong with hopping in a reliable car and when you have to go someplace and just going, you know, without worrying about it conking out on you or something like that, or having no car at all, you know. Nothing wrong with those things at all, but to be attached to them and feel like that this is my happiness, you know, that's the thing. It's not going to work that way. And yeah, happiness is really found in understanding more than anything else, I think. It's not necessarily intellectual. I mean, we can't think our way into being happy. It's more of a understanding of release, you know, and, you know, a great deal of acceptance. Not blind acceptance, but accepting things as they are. I was talking to Terry on the way here about, you know, these dualities that we have, and this is okay and this is screwed up, you know. This is good and this is bad, hot and cold, all of these different dualities. But as a whole, the world is non-dual. You know, the world as a whole is non-dual, and we live in this non-dual world, but it's made up of billions of dualities. And any kind of pain and suffering we have comes from our unawareness, our unacceptance of those dualities. That we think this should be this way, this should be this way, but we need both of those in all these aspects. We wouldn't understand hate without love. It's just you know, there's variables, you know, like this is the non-dual, this is love and this is hate, and we can kind of, you know, play with them a little bit that way, but they're still going to be there. There's always two sides to a coin, otherwise it wouldn't be a coin. And, you know, so this happiness is kind of, like I say, discovered through this understanding, and it's not difficult understanding. It's just some type of clarity that comes about, you know, by being aware of these dualities and acceptance. And again, letting go of the sticky stuff, the things that we feel are going to be my happiness. This is my happiness right here. Because we have to give it up at some point. I mean, that doesn't mean that we're going to give away all of our possessions and become spiritual gurus or anything like that. But it's through understanding. Yeah. Robert Puff, is that a name?
Robert Puff.
Robert Puff. Yeah, I'm sure I ran into him on YouTube.
He has a lengthy, well, little, like 15-minute blogs. If you don't want to buy the book, you can get it on Amazon or Audible to listen to. But you can also get it on YouTube, and it's free. And he breaks it down into different aspects of happiness. Will this relationship make me happy? Will this new toy make me happy? Kind of the things you just wrote.
Yeah.
He delved, and he talks, he uses a lot of analogies about
Yeah.
experiences with his clients. And some of the happiest people that he deals with have virtually nothing.
Yeah. That's true.
It's hard to listen to him
Without feeling good. Yeah.
There's nothing to disagree with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, some of the happiest people as a whole, like meeting a happy family, like a happy, healthy family, were the poorest people that I've ever met in my life. In Thailand, the rice farmers, they had rice, so they were happy. They had a lot of rice, and if they needed a chicken, they would take their rice and trade it for a chicken, or they would whatever food they needed, and. But you meet them and they just light up, just happy. It's just like a way of living, and very, very much family orientated. Very much the family is very important, and so it has to provide a lot of the happiness too.
Well, in support of what you just said, there's a study just came out this week where these we're studying what happiness is about, and it's always about your connections and your relationships with others, with family, with friends. And then that Harvard study that they did, an 80-year-long longest study in history, started at Harvard back in the 20s. In fact, John F. Kennedy was one of the members of that study. And they found that the people who achieved the most longevity and reported the happiest lives were the ones who had, not the big airplanes and the yachts and stuff, but the people who had the best relationships.
Best relationships, period, right?
Period, yeah, not necessarily romantic, but just
right.
Family, friends, co-workers, had a wide network of people in their lives.
Yeah, very important. Yeah, we feel, a man is not an island. Is that how that saying goes? Something like that. Relationship, we're very relational people. I mean, people are, period. And the better we can get along with people, and that's it. That's a great deal of acceptance too. How we get along with others, without judging them, without shunning them, or being open towards their ideas. And a lot of our difficulties, I see people individually in the other room here. A lot of times when they come in, it's because of relationships. That's the hardest one, it seems, relationships. Or it's related to relationships. The loss that people have, the hardest loss, is usually a relationship with either a loved one or an animal, a relationship with an animal. So it's, right? Cats? We got 2 cat people right here. We're kind of ready to wrap it up here. Anything from anybody else? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Any announcements or anything? We got a beginning meditation class, 6-week course that's being taught by Ryan Nibick, and that starts on the 16th, I think, of July. But there's a few flyers over here. Check out the flyers from time to time by the door, and there's some information there you might want to take with you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having